Today, I'm delighted to once again, I think it's the third time, speak to Artur Rehi. He's not just an influential YouTuber, he also has a huge impact in helping to fundraise and get vehicles to Ukraine. That's for 69th Sniffing Brigade. Many of you will know that we work with KYIV Ukraine, but 69th Sniffing Brigade, if you're not aware of it, do extraordinary work in getting huge numbers of very well serviced and well constructed vehicles over to Ukraine, and they make a huge difference. Arthur also was an Estonian reserve soldier and completed conscription in 2018. Now, if you're not familiar with his channel, do please check it out. It is one of the largest, one of the most impactful in this space. And what I look forward to in these conversations, he brings, let's say, some Baltic realism into the discussion around Ukraine and what the West needs to do. Artur, welcome back.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Always a massive pleasure. And quite a few months have passed since we last caught up. Not only have you had a big impact, but here we are. The war is still going on, and it seems to be even more malignant at this point. You have a decisive effort by Ukraine to attrip Russian energy infrastructure. Perhaps on the plus side, the gloves have been taken off. Restrictions that have been placed on them have been removed. Let's say that the Biden regime, Biden administration put on them. But Russia has also taken the gloves off and is trying to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure. I mean, what's your impression of where we're at this point?
Russia has been trying to destroy Ukrainian energy infrastructure ever since the first day, and unfortunately, they have been successful. About over 50%, well over half of all of Ukrainian electric electricity producing facilities have been destroyed. But Ukraine only this and last winter has started to hit back on Russia, and they're doing it even more efficiently this year, actually, hitting even very small substations. For example, 5 days ago, I looked at a map that summarized substations around Moscow. These are very small targets in the level of this war, about 330 kilowatt substations, these small ones. But Ukraine is focusing them down because if you hit all, let's say about 50 of them in that specific oblast, it's lights out in Moscow. There's many targets, but it's a death through a thousand cuts. And Ukraine is really focusing them down one by one, like pinpoint accuracy.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it's only the larger strikes that really make it into the media, if they get into the media at all. So it's the large refinery strikes, which I think will have an impact on revenues and have an impact on logistics for the military, especially. These substation fires and damage, they tend to go beneath the radar. But as you say here, I mean, once they're gone, does Russia have the capability to replace them or manufacture parts to replace them? Or is it going to have to cannibalize infrastructure from, say, the provinces to keep the capital going? What?
They will definitely prioritize Moscow and St. Petersburg and those areas, and they will cannibalize the far eastern areas, Kamchatka and the middle Russia, Siberian areas. And I think they have to, at some point, to some degree, have an ability to produce them also, but definitely not at the speed. Plus, all like the majority of engineers who worked in these companies who are emergency fixers of these electrical fires and these, traumas that happen, they have been sent to the front. These companies have sent their own men to the front. So Russian society has been in a way cannibalized because, some firefighters are at the front, some police are at the front, some electricians are at the front. So people who are supposed to fix it in a number of hours, these substations, they're not there. They're not filling their positions. That's why these hits are more painful because the professionals just aren't there.
Oh, we saw that last winter, didn't we? Where you started to get some really significant breakdowns of these centralized heating systems, and apartments froze, other apartments were flooded. There were lots of videos of those. And I speak to, Konstantin Samarlov regularly, who used to work in the energy industry in Russia itself and is quite familiar with that system. And of course, if many of those engineers have been sent away, this winter is likely, I think, to be not only colder, but also the infrastructure is going to be less well serviced and it's more creaking and more dilapidated and there's fewer parts and fewer people. This is going to place a lot of pressure on the civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, majority of Russian and I've got to be honest here, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Polish, like ex-Soviet, the Eastern Bloc, all of this infrastructure, majority was built 50s, 60s, 70s. They had these massive campaigns with Khrushchev and Brezhnev to build up the Soviet housing infrastructure, like, huge campaigns all over the Soviet Union. They tried to house like 200 million people in 20 years. So they built these massive piping systems, heating systems, centralized heating systems. Uh, they were okay systems to the time, but now over a half a century has passed. And if you maintain them, for example, like the European Union countries who were formerly Eastern Bloc, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we're digging up the streets, investing massive amounts of money to exchange these pipes. They worked fine for 50 years. Now we need to exchange them. We're putting in these like tens of millions to exchange them. They don't do that in Russia at all. They never did. And now the timing is past, and every year another pipe bursts, another, let's call it what it is, poop fountain. We've seen them only in Russia where poop is bursting out of the ground. I mean, this is just Soviet infrastructure that worked its time for 50 years, and now it's time to fail, and it just fails. And it's going to happen more and more every year. And unfortunately, it is the poorest Russian citizens who suffer the most on this.
I was speaking to a sort of Russian. I mean, she's not distant because she left some time ago, but she's a Russian novelist called Elvira Barry, and she was saying that she'd seen some of these images. Now, this is the ultimate Potemkin facade, isn't it? Because if you look at not just Tucker Carlson, but Sasha from Russia and all these kind of propagandistic accounts, you could get the impression that Moscow is this amazing, shiny metropolitan place. And of course, there are regions in Moscow that are like that. Of course, it's a vast place. There's going to be some really grotty, grim areas as well, as we know. But you could create this impression that Russia is a first world European country with extraordinary infrastructure. Whereas what Elvira was saying is whenever you see these images from the provinces, these are Soviet buildings that have, if they're lucky, had a lick of paint under Putin. But essentially, it's that infrastructure that was built in the 60s, 70s, possibly 80s, or they didn't build much in the 80s. And now everything is just literally falling apart. And those extremities, those provinces of Russia, have just been left to wither and die. There's no hope, no infrastructure, no money, really nothing, no freedom, so they can do anything about it either.
But now a shining knight in a white armor comes into these provinces, which is $30,000 per one-time payment to join the army, and then after that, 5,000 every month to your family. And if you die, your mother gets a brand new Lada or an apartment. So Putin has really built up a system to keep the people in the circle, and now he has the war chest to empty up into these provinces, luring these people who have nothing to get something. And he keeps the people poor so he can manipulate them with money. Unfortunately, it works perfectly for him. It works exactly like he wanted it to work, and that's what he's doing. These $30,000 of one-time payment to go to the army. I mean, this is what 10 years salary for an average Russian in a certain province. It's so much amount of money that people are ready to just die tomorrow for it, and they
Yeah.
join the army.
And it's not as if that money is necessarily going to build up infrastructure. You can see it just sort of, like water seeping into the soil. It's going to be used, it's going to be burnt. Some people might, buy nice TVs, do some DIY. Some people drink themselves to death. We kind of know that's going to happen at scale. But without reform or freedoms, or good governance, I mean, all of that is going to be wasted. It's a one-time sort of hit, isn't it?
It is. It's buying these people's lives for the front, for the meat to soak up Western ammunition and Ukrainian ammunition and drones, and that's what they do. But and for 2023 to the end of 2024, I mean, we saw a massive burning up of this money. I mean, everything was going up in Russia, everything connected to military. Factories were out producing themselves. They had this competition. But now we see they're getting tired. The system is eating itself. Whatever statistics you look at, it's going down. Compare it to 2023, 2024, it's on a downward trend, and that's the whole Russian budget, revenues, default payments on loans, everything. So the money is slowly running out. there is still left. There's tens of billions of left in that war chest, but it's showing signs of the end reaching. And when it truly does, it's going to be the 90s and even worse. And we see signs of that already. And people are
Yeah.
getting tired of that because we all talk, oh, Russia's going to collapse. And it's 3 years old story already. Oh, collapse already. It's such a vast beast. It takes like several hits to take it down, several years of this. So I hope people don't get bored too fast. It takes time, but they will collapse.
That's it. And I think this war has always been, and this is partly, I think, the fault of the Western allies as well, the lack of vision, the lack of strategy, the lack of leadership, and being coercively feared by Russian nuclear threats, coerced into not giving Ukraine all it needs at the right time. But this war seems to have been on a kind of knife edge, seems to be on a kind of pivot almost the entire time, certainly from 23 onwards, with neither side either having the strategy or the equipment to achieve a fundamental breakthrough and annihilate the other side. It's constantly, all the evolution of technology and warfare has gone into sort of maintaining almost a sort of status quo. Is that your impression of it, or do you think it's a far more complex picture?
I've always thought, and I still think, and I think it's the truth. I mean, there are enough weapons and weapons production capabilities on the European soil to win that war in a year. But European Union countries have been frightened by Putin with the nuclear saber rattling
So,
and all of
yeah.
that. Every time they step up to support Ukraine, Putin steps up these threats, these Oreshnik threats, submarine threats, nuclear missile threats. We see that as Estonians because we don't have the luxury of even being afraid of the nuclear missiles because Russian army can do worse to us than any nuclear hit can do because St. Petersburg right next to us. They're not going to hit us. The army will obliterate us. So the nuclear threats just isn't even a reality to be afraid in Estonia. Like we see through that. And every time Putin or Medvedev or whoever comes out with another threat, we see European Union countries taking that seriously. It's so weird. We're 10 times stronger and we're afraid. So we play this game where we play by their rules. It's so strange looking from here, from the Baltics and Poland and Finland. We have experience with this. And then we have this like Germany and other countries who really respect some of the red lines set by Putin. And it's so bizarre looking from here. These countries have the strength to end that war in months. They have that. It's a political decision.
And it looks like Trump has sort of finally figured out that some of this is bluff. Now, I don't want to be the one that sort of, flip-flops and, oh, Trump's changed and suddenly he's aligned with,
Yeah.
I mean, at heart, I think he is aligned with a more authoritarian, Putinist view of how the world works. It's a selfish, ungenerous, unimaginative, almost view, which is held by many, but it seems to reflect the Putinist view of the world. But at this point, there seems to be a little bit of a tussle between kings, as it were. And Putin's rattled his nuclear saber. He's said he's going to do nuclear tests. Now he's rode back and said, "Oh, they were tests, but they're not really nuclear." Because Trump has just said, well, why are you talking about these missiles with 14,000 kilometers? We've got a sub on your border. We could take out all your cities in 5 minutes. So what are you even talking about? And okay, you're going to test nukes. Right, we're going to test nukes too. And it seems that calling Putin's bluff on this is not what they were expecting. Whether this transpires and turns into something else, which is, hardened support for Ukraine, I doubt, because at the same time, you've got the US withdrawing combat troops from the Baltic. So you've got this extraordinary mix of signals going on here.
Yeah, I mean, we have these signals of US lessening their military presence in Europe in general, but I don't agree with Trump's methods. I don't like his personality at all. What I can stand behind is the message that European Union has the economical strength to build out the strongest military power this globe has seen. And this has happened in the past. We definitely shouldn't go back there, but we have the means to defend ourselves. Again, it's about, I don't know how to say it, personality or spine, or like, do you have the strength and willpower and courage to take that responsibility and build up your country's military. Poland is doing that. I'm very glad. Finland is doing that. We in Estonia, we're buying so much ammunition right now, so much weapons, training up our reservists. My military unit was changed. I just went out to train. We are preparing for a war with Russia, not only to make it very expensive to start that war, but we are preparing to win that war. And people don't really say that. So I have to say it out loud. We are getting ready to defeat Russia militarily. People say, oh, let's try to avoid war. No, we're getting ready to beat them on the battlefield. That's what we're doing in the Baltics and Poland and Finland. And I
Uh,
hope European countries, other countries will follow suit.
And that's an interesting one. I was speaking to one of Ukraine's the foremost philosophers. He said one of the challenges in the West is not simply being reflexively coerced by Russia, it's the inability to imagine victory. It's been so long since the Second World War. It's been so long since a dramatic and unambiguous victory in warfare, especially when there's sort of no real moral ambiguity there. And of course there's going to be a different perspective in the Baltics because yeah, Western Europe won the Second World War, but ceded Central and Eastern Europe. So it's I would almost say it's a partial victory. But anyway, people here think of Second World War as being a triumphant victory. Um, and I think it's become quite difficult to imagine and really pull the will together to want to be victorious and, of course, make the sacrifice that's necessary there. And what Ermolenko was saying is that in Ukraine, they never had the kind of visionism of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where you started to get quite cynical about the idea of heroism and people who made immense sacrifices in World War II. Historians and people doing exhibitions started to focus more on, say, the home front, on broad societal things, and it almost became shameful to talk about heroism. And in Ukraine, they didn't go through that process, and you have a generation of people who are making extraordinary sacrifices. And the general population appreciates their sacrifice. You see it, when you're in Ukraine, people have a very keen awareness of what the defenders are doing on their behalf.
Yeah, Ukrainians right now paying the prices with their lives for the work that was not done in the 90s in Ukraine. The first 10 years when all the former Soviet bloc countries got independent, there was a very big difference in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland and Ukraine. Ukraine did not tear broken these ties with the Soviet past. When we in Estonia, we demolished not the Gulag, sorry, but the kolkhoz system, which is a collectivized farm system. We demolished that. That meant like hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs overnight. It was really economically painful in the 90s. It was poverty. We demolished all the system. Nothing new was built yet. Ukraine didn't do that. So we paid that price in the 90s, and the dividends of that price is now NATO and European Union and democracy. Ukraine didn't do that. I'm not here to blame anything. I'm just here to illustrate that if you don't fight the Russians and their way of life right now, you will fight it 30 years from now. It will be much more painful. It's definitely not finger pointing, but just to illustrate how this price increases over the decades. And Ukraine is fighting the heaviest price right now. So if we don't we didn't interfere with Crimea, with Georgia, with Chechnya, all of those conflicts. And now there's no choice. We have to. And this price can get even higher in 20 years when they attack whichever country Russia has a border with. So, yeah, I'm saying let's finally wake up and pay the price now. Invest now. Again, going back to the infrastructure, let's invest now so we don't have the poop fountain tomorrow.
Yes. I, I find Estonia endlessly fascinating because, of course, I visited in the 90s and already very, very quickly, say Thailand and places started to resemble, not the sort of Mikroraiony and the sort of, the Russian speaking areas, but the center of town very quickly started to resemble Helsinki. I mean, it happened with extraordinary rapidity. And now, of course, traveling through Estonia, it's indistinguishable from any advanced Western country. In fact, it's looking a lot cleaner and better managed than parts of Germany and Britain, dare I say it. Not quite Not quite the same in Latvia and Lithuania. I mean, they seem to um, have tackled the Soviet legacy slower in a more moderate sense, whereas Estonia just went for everything, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's reforming the civil service infrastructure, administration, education. You guys just went to town immediately on everything. That must have required, dare I say it, quite a bit of forward planning, and it must have required quite a, let's say, a culture of a deep understanding of what the Soviet mentality and system were in order to be able to tackle it so rigorously and at such scale. I, do you have a strong diaspora who were, part of this, or how did that happen? I'm intrigued by it.
It's very deeply connected to my own lineage because my grandfather in the 90s was in the parliament and was the counselor for the president at the time. Also for the prime minister of he was in the central committee in 1991 when the Estonia was elected free. He was the one to elect one of those people to give that signature for in the parliament. And they actually didn't know what's going to happen to them because they all signed a paper that went to Moscow saying that we're now free. And they didn't know if it's going to be tanks in Siberia after that because there were 50,000 Soviet troops inside Estonia, and these guys were like, okay,
Mm.
we're going to elect ourselves free. So they
And in
did it. And
Lithuania, they did send the tanks in.
they did Estonia also, but in Estonia they didn't drive over the people because the leader of those forces, General Dudayev, the later president of Chechnya, was also a very close friend of my grandfather's and that the new president of Estonia. And Chechnya was also oppressed, so they understood each other then. But in Lithuania, 14 people died. So it was really close calls, and it like signaled that bravery. Like, I don't care what happens to me tomorrow, I'm gonna give that signature. For example, my grandfather was deported to Siberia when he was a 4-year-old boy. In 1991, when he elected, he gave that vote to the Freedom Republic of Estonia. He was like accepting the fate that this is gonna happen to me again tomorrow. And this is the bravery. I see that maybe politicians also now don't have in European Union, also in Estonia. I mean, this was the golden generation that took the responsibility and they accepted their own deaths if it might happen tomorrow. And that was the tiger jump of Estonia in the 90s. And I'm so glad because I'm reaping the dividends of that. I have my own car, I have a mortgage, I can raise my kids in a free country in European Union. I mean, I am living the life that they made. So, but I know that it's now my job and our generation to do that for the future, our children. And that's what the Ukrainians are doing right now. And I would love to scream to the European peoples that like we have to do this now. We have to pay the price now.
And isn't it extraordinary as well the way people either forget what Soviet life was like, or they're a generation which has undergone a kind of very curious brainwashing, certainly in Russia, which is a certain nostalgia, as if this was a golden age. Whereas, anyone who's read the history, anyone who, as I did, saw the tail end of that system in 1992, the detritus of the Soviet Union, the litter, and the damage it caused people, the mental trauma and psychological trauma that it inflicted upon hundreds of millions. I mean, it's grotesque to see those revisionist narratives coming out now.
Yeah, Putin has really lowered the self-identity of an individual in Russia and raised up the empire identity like it was in the Soviet Union, where the empire succeeded. Doesn't matter if an individual suffered, but if the empire succeeded, then that individual who suffered had a meaning for that suffering also. I'm suffering for something bigger than me. That's good. Putin is bringing back that, and Russians secretly are so used to it, they long for it because they really couldn't handle that I exist stuff in the 90s. They couldn't really handle the capitalism and everybody for themselves because it was too sudden, too violent. There were oligarchs and shootings, and it was not like America. It was a lot more bloody, like 100 years of evolution in America and 10 years in Russia. It was just a blood fest. So people have a really bad connection to freedom and capitalism. They have a lot better connection of stability to that state controls everything, and it's a big empire, and we get to be a part of that big empire. So people accept it because they like it connects to stability for them. Even though refineries are burning, they at least don't have what was happening in the 90s. Although
Yet,
it's
yeah,
coming.
it's coming down the track, and it's potentially going to be worse because, the 90s had a degree of optimism. Yes, things are absolutely terrible, but, I'm starting to earn some money. I'm starting to do up my flat. I've just privatized my apartment. So I think the 90s are sort of pathologized in an extraordinary way. But the flip side is that almost everybody who had a state apartment could pay a small fee like $300 or $60 or something, and then they had ownership of their house. It's extraordinary to think, okay, some of these are not in great condition, but there was a certain liberation to that as well, which I think has been sort of steamrolled away out of people's memories. But that was, it had extraordinary potential. But it's the failure of imagination to create a non-imperial identity. I think people focus on the poverty a lot, but it's the failure to create a post-imperial Russian national identity, because that's a hard thing to do. And it requires trust and cohesion, which were certainly kind of lacking. And the Soviet Union did everything they could to destroy trust and cohesion. I mean, let's turn to Ukraine because I find the most remarkable thing about this not is how traumatized and damaged Russia is, but how Ukraine has managed to get through that. They experienced the same or even worse trauma in some senses with the Holodomor and the Second World War, and even the Civil War was absolutely brutal in Ukraine, with armies retaking Kiev multiple times, red and white armies, and committing atrocities every time they did. Despite all of that extraordinary suffering and repression, Ukrainians seem to me to be, they don't have massive psychological complexes, and there's a level of sort of trust and cooperation there, which is totally absent, in my impression, in Russia.
Yes, Estonia, for example, after the 90s, really set its foundation on the national state. How do you call in Estonia? It's called Rahvusriik, which means Estonian national state. It's our culture, our language, our state. It's the national awakening was in the end of the 1800s and again in the 1990s. It was the second national awakening. So we had something to go back to. We had that unbroken lineage of Estonian people, Estonian culture, language, the grandmothers, the stories. Ukrainians also have that, but there's nothing like that in Russia. It has always been federations occupied by Muscovia, so they had never had this one identity. They never like grew that into one nation as it should be, on which you can base on your national awakening. For example, if the Soviet Union fails, then there's a national awakening of a Russian person. There never was a Russian person. There was a subject of an empire always. Where in Estonia it was, I am an Estonian. I speak an Estonian language. This is my country. I will not even throw trash on the ground because it's me. This land is me. Russia never had that. It was always trashy and bad, and you can trash around because it's not your land. You're a slave of a big empire. So they could never wake up that Russian who holds their country dear, who has a civil society, because there was nobody there. It was hollow inside. Soviet Union was hollow inside, and so the Russian Empire now is, and it's gonna crumble because Ukrainians, they are having a second national awakening right now, and it's a strong one. And people like that, it's really hard to destroy peoples like that. I mean, Estonians even small people. They tried to deport us away. Even Peter the Great deported the second biggest city of Estonia in the 1700s. They deported the whole city empty. We're still here. It's really hard to kill off people who know who they are and who respect their land and have a tied down relationship to it. And Ukrainians are like that. It's really difficult to destroy them.
That's it. And this is why the rhetoric from Russian propagandists have turned from being, I would say, imperial colonial to now it is clear rhetoric around genocide and erasure. I mean, that's the primary objective, it seems, of Russia's invasion at this point, is to sterilize the Ukrainian lands of Ukrainian people and language. I mean, quite clear, and it's endlessly frustrating that that simple truth does not seem to be that prevalent in the media, and even some analysts will endlessly debate whether this is the case or not.
Yes, Stalin personally did not like the Ukrainian people, and when he ordered the grain to be exported and created the Holodomor, the worst man-made famine, it was his personal grudge on the Ukrainians, and also Ukraine being such a fertile land, it fed the whole Soviet Union. I mean, he wanted to make sure it's filled with people who are deadly loyal to the regime, and Ukrainians were not because they had their own national identity. So he tried to kill them off. He killed what 5 to 10 million, depending on who you ask, of people, and that only strengthened the Ukrainian national identity. This is what strong nations do. If you push them from outside, they get stronger inside. It's so weird. Same has been happening with the Jews, with Estonians, with Ukrainians. Yeah, it's a paradox. You push them from outside, they find the inner resolve, and it becomes their national identity. We have been beaten. We wake up from that. It's such a strange paradox that the Kremlin ideologists don't understand. They're
I don't
making
think
Ukrainians stronger.
I don't think Western. Often I've seen this question in the media, especially around the question of whether Ukraine should bomb Moscow, which I think we agree that at least bombing the infrastructure, not civilians, is a good thing. Bringing the war home to Russians is a good thing. But they often assume, like, yeah, but if Ukraine does that, Russians will pull together because they're projecting, as you say, this idea of the nation state um, getting stronger under pressure and duress in the way that the British did during the Blitz, of course. I mean, that's absolutely demonstrably happened. Okay, there was lots of crime and stuff which they covered up, and lots of catastrophes. But generally speaking, there is this great coming together and coordination, which eventually led to our participation in the victory. But Russia doesn't behave like that, and this is a completely false projection of how Russia will behave if we put more pressure on it. My guess here is that it becomes more brittle the more pressure you place on it, because it doesn't have that nation state, that nation identity, that trust, cooperation, and commonality as the glue that binds it together.
Yes, I don't see it also. I mean, if I look at the Russian culture, so to speak, the Ruski mirror, whatever neo-fascist Russia they're trying to create, I don't see the centerpiece of it. I mean, I see what they're putting in there. It's the Orthodox religion and it's the neo-fascist look upon your president and all of that. But I look, being a part of a nation with a very strong sense of culture, I don't see that in there. It seems to me hollow. They don't have even a civil society. Every time nobody's looking, they start to steal and rape and do bad things to each other. Whether in civilized societies when nobody's looking, of course that happens to a degree, but majority of people will self-organize and still make sure the culture carries on and everybody can manage. But in Russia, it's why they're so afraid of the 90s is because it was carnage, it was chaos. There was no civil society, every man for himself. As soon as the central power weakens, everybody starts to get weapons and shoot at each other and steal things as much as possible. There's no nation there, there's no central culture there. It's just the horde, the Mongol horde that they took over that culture from them.
That's it. And in any identity that could emerge based on individual localities, that tends to get erased purposefully. They try to erase it. So if you have the emergence, as there was, prior to Second World War, a distinct sort of Leningrad or St. Petersburg identity, I think part of why Stalin helped to set things up so there's a siege of Leningrad. This is quite convenient because not only do you resist the Nazis, but also it helps you, like with the Holodomor, to erase a certain identity, which is a little bit of a threat to you. And any sort of regional identity, whether it's Tambov or Pskov or wherever. One of the central policies, and people be shocked by this, one of the central policies of the Soviet Union and Putinism is to really ensure that these local identities don't flourish. they don't become a sort of competing or part of local power or a source of local power, identity, and cohesion. The state is built up to destroy them. So if Russia's going to fragment, it seems to me the only way to build it up into something meaningful will be to start at the very, very small scale, down to the level of a stairwell, a street, a village, a rayon. You're going to have to sort of, on the territory of what was Russia, build things from the ground up again.
I think the best outcome for Russian people would be the power to the local governments. Mariel Republic, it's led by people from that culture and ethnicity, which is Finno-Ugric, Bashkortostan or Chechnya,
Mordovia, yeah, all these different
yeah,
places, yeah.
led by local they all have their own languages, their own cultures. I mean, if you get the power away from the Kremlin and give it to them, I think they would build up their national states that the people would care about and would care so much they wouldn't trash around, they wouldn't steal because it's their language, their people, and their land. Right now, it's Kremlin's language, Kremlin's people and land, and they're just subjects. So of course they wouldn't care about it. In Estonia, we had this saying from the Baltic German nobility who like occupied us for 800 years, and we were like serfs under them. It's called mõisa köislas lohiseb, which in English is it's the nobleman's rope. Let it like slip behind the cart. Don't pick it up. It's the nobleman's. It's not my land. Let it go. Because it wasn't. We were serfs. But now that we have our own language and land, that saying is just from the past. And Russians right now, they're serfs of the empire. So they couldn't even care about where they put the trash, what window do they break, if they pay the taxes.
Yes, or if the sewage pipe is spilling everywhere, no
Yeah.
one's going to fix it. Um,
Um,
well, let's dig into your own activism because you've been doing a lot for 69th Sniffing Brigade. We can see that fantastic NAFO sort of flag there. You've been extraordinarily active. You've been to Ukraine. Well, I don't know how many times now because it's a lot, I'm guessing. But your personal motivation, where do you find the energy to keep this up? And how important is it that actually people don't just, let's say, passively consume freedom, but sort of take a stand in the way that you've been doing?
Well, as a kid, my grandfather told me stories, and I grew up with that culture of pain because of the Soviet Union. So I'm already brought up in that cultural space, but also personally, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life that has caused me a lot of pain. So I've seen how my decisions cause me a lot of pain in my life. And that comes in with paying the price at the right time, doing it now than later, and not hoping that anybody else will come and fix your life and all of that stuff. Um, it makes so much sense for me to try to let other people to see it the same way, that it's not for granted. I mean, I live in Tallinn, which is what, 200 kilometers from the Russian border. I have no luxury at all to just ignore any of this. Although there are people in Estonia who do, and people are really good at ignoring things, but I have not that luxury. Being to Ukraine also, it's just so much in front of my eyes that it's not possible for me personally. Even if I tried, I couldn't ignore it. Um, and perhaps the second answer would be also that I really enjoy it. I really like it's. I get to fight for something I believe. Like it's even difficult for some generations. I mean, the baby boomers or whoever was born after the second, they didn't have their great war anymore. Perhaps was Vietnam War their war? No, but I have my war. I know exactly why I'm fighting, who I'm fighting. For me, it's very clear. So I'm blessed to have a reason to do this. So a lot of people are searching for that. I'm blessed to have it. So it's a very good reason. I just enjoy having a goal that I can really believe in.
And what does the immediate future hold? I mean, what trips, what fundraisers, what campaigns are running? How can people make a difference?
I think to donate to 69 Sniffing Brigade. I haven't done a campaign with them for over a year. There's personal reasons. Me and my wife were expecting a child, so I'm not traveling to Ukraine anytime soon because I have a small baby then. But again, yeah, if people want to make a difference, definitely hop on a car and go to Ukraine. It's it's gonna sound weird, but it's so much fun. It is number one, it's fun, it's terrifying. The fear of death is the most positive thing you can actually feel. If you've never felt it, it will wake you up for the rest of your life. It's a good thing to feel. So go and have fun and feel the fear of death, and you will never take anything unappreciated anymore. So yeah, I
And
would say that.
the resilience of the people. That's also you get to experience the amazing food, but people living their lives fully aware of the danger they're living in, but carrying on anyway and making the best of the situation. In fact, trying to make things better at the same time. That's what I find absolutely extraordinary is the effort going into making things beautiful and tasty and nice and part of their identity, all while under, the shadow of drones and missiles.
It is. They smile to you, they're nice to you. They're in the summers, they're planting flowers and the missiles land next to them and still planting flowers. It's just such a beautiful people. Yeah.
Inspiring, absolutely. Arthur, I mean, this has been an absolute pleasure having you back on. Hopefully we've given people an impression of why this fight is immediate and important, but also some inspiration of why they should go and experience Ukraine because it will benefit their lives as well and their purpose. Well, good luck with everything you're doing, and especially good luck with the child on the way. That's a transformative experience. I know, having two, gone through that twice, and now they're in a far more difficult stage. But I won't sort of give you the details of that. You'll come to that eventually when they discover alcohol and all the rest.
You don't want to scare me away with wait until they get to be teenagers, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've
Yeah.
got one who's 12 and one who's 24, so I've been through
Oh, yeah.
one set and about to get, go through another. But it's good, and I think if you're good people and you impart the values to your kids, then it's not going to be too difficult. Um,
I would hope so. They're gonna
yeah,
rebel against me, I know that.
yeah. Well, that's yeah. If they've got strong personalities, of course they are. And that's part of it.
Written
Um,
into it, yeah.
Well, good luck with that. I certainly know that what they've got is a sort of inspirational father there to look up to for everything you've been doing there. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for everything you do, and certainly in the pro-Ukraine space, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Thank you for having me on.
Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to make a personal recommendation that I know you will appreciate. You may have seen my interview last week with the producer of the film series KYIV of Mine, Ronnie Apteker. Well, I've partnered with them to help raise awareness of what I believe is an important series of films made for a Western audience to help break through absurd stereotypes about Ukraine, some of which, of course, are amplified by Russian propaganda. You can watch these films for free now. Details in a second. KYIV of Mine is a documentary series about Ukraine's extraordinary capital, which I had the privilege to visit for the first time in January this year. The film production began in 2018, and of course, much has changed since then. It's now 2025, and the story is far from over. KYIV of Mine is a fast paced, beautifully filmed, humorous, fun, insightful, heartbreaking, moving, and hopeful work. The very antithesis, in fact, of a doom laden and worthy wartime documentary. This is a work that is extraordinarily uplifting. My friend Operator Starsky says the film is made with so much love. The film series will make you laugh and cry. It's the only film about Ukraine that began before the war yet has traced lives through the tumultuous times and which follows the lives of more than a dozen Ukrainians in real time. This is an historic period told through highly personal and emotive stories from Kiev's days of emerging prosperity after the Maidan Revolution through COVID and the full-scale invasion. This film is a breath of fresh air. Ukraine deserves a better conversation in the world, one that isn't centered around war, says Jolyon Ellis, filmmaker on KYIV of Mine. It's hard not to argue with that, and the filmmakers have fully delivered on this promise. This is essential watching for anyone who calls themselves pro-Ukrainian, but I think it's also vital to get friends, colleagues, and family to watch it too, because the reality is few people have a vivid impression of Ukraine or any direct connection with its people. War is inhumane and abstract. Building an alternative perception is essential for engaging the world with the importance of Ukraine's struggle. A final word from our partners, the makers of KYIV of Mine. All three films are now available to watch for free on YouTube. Please check out the links to the dedicated website, which tells you more about the film, its subjects, and the filmmakers. Also in the description is a link to the YouTube channel where you can watch the films now. Do let us know in the comments what you think of them and if they inspire you as much as they have inspired me.